Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to TreePeople's first ever virtual Youth Leadership Summit. Thank you so much for being here because we realize that this is after school hours and you're choosing to spend this afternoon with us and share the time and share this time with us. So we wanted to host this event for you because during these virtual times, it's hard to feel connected to each other and to the world. And we're faced with so many challenges right now, and sometimes it can feel overwhelming. Our goal for this event is not only to provide you with contextual information about some of the pressing climate issues in Los Angeles that is relevant to you and your future, but also to provide you with tangible steps to take things into your own hands and to take action in a meaningful way. So our team has been working really, really hard to make this event as fun, engaging, educational, and inspiring as possible. We're so excited to have you here, and we can't wait to share with you everything that we have planned for today and tomorrow. So please keep yourself muted during the presentations unless we prompt you or during the Q&A session when we have the career panel towards the end. We would love to see your cameras on, but of course that's optional. I'm sure most of you are overly familiar with Zoom, but here are some of the main features. We want to make this as interactive as possible. So please feel free to use the reactions to clap or do a thumbs up, as well as ask questions and putting relevant comments in the chat. Our presenters and team will be monitoring the chat throughout the event. So don't feel shy. We want to hear from you. We want you to engage with us. So yeah. Here is today's agenda. We're gonna do a little bit of intros and then do a really quick little icebreaker activity. Then we're gonna jump into our virtual toxic waste tour, exploring environmental justice with Kenny Derrick, who is TreePeople's waste and recycling specialist. Then we're gonna get into environmental advocacy and policy with Maria and Manny Gomez, who is our Director of Policy Initiatives. And then we have the Green Careers panel with 3 amazing panelists, and I'll be the moderator. So I want to ask, how many of you have heard of TreePeople before this event? You can let us know in the chat or do a reaction. I'm seeing Emily raising her hand. Some of you have not. Have you volunteered with us before? Have you come up to our headquarters at Coldwater Canyon? Or have you worked with us before through Generation Earth? We do work with middle and high schools. So I'm seeing many of you have not. Thank you, Kathy, for the enthusiasm. And so it seems like we have a lot of people who have not heard of TreePeople, which is great because now we're giving you, the opportunity to become TreePeople. And after this event, we're all going to be TreePeople. So we are an environmental nonprofit organization based in Los Angeles, California. We promote sustainable urban ecosystems in LA through education, volunteer and community-based events, and advocacy. We focus on increasing LA's urban forest by supporting people in planting and caring for trees at homes, on schools, and in neighborhoods. We also support volunteers in restoring damaged local forest ecosystems in the Santa Monica Mountains and San Gabriel Mountains. So we do forest restoration after fire events and getting rid of invasive species to restore our native habitat. Samantha, I see that you planted some trees in the Angeles Forest and took a tour. That's awesome. Welcome back. And beyond simply planting and caring for trees, TreePeople also works to tackle things like water conservation issues, as well as take part in research and policy to inform best environmental practices. We have around 5 departments, I believe, the education department, which is our team, as well as forestry, that take care of the urban plantings, as well as the restoration. And then we have our research and policy department, as well as the development department, which focuses on fundraising, and we have community organizing as well. So we have a lot of departments that, we're like a holistic organization that tackle things from all angles, because ultimately environmental change requires all hands on deck, no matter, if regardless of if you're a high school student taking action in your own home, or our politicians, creating these decisions that's impacting a lot of people. So here are just some pictures. We have a before and after picture here of a restoration site in the in the Angeles Forest. You can see before there's a lot of barren land, and then we have a lush native ecosystem afterwards, as well as work planting events with the community through our education department and volunteering events. And we're really driven by our volunteer work, which is why we love hosting these events and sharing our mission with the public. So this is our mission statement. TreePeople's mission is to inspire, engage, and support people to take personal responsibility for the urban environment, making it safe, healthy, fun, and sustainable, and to share our process as a model for the world. So what's exciting is that TreePeople is actually one of the leaders in the global picture in regards to urban forestry. So that's really exciting. And we, being in California, we can really be progressive with our environmental policies, and TreePeople is basically carrying out work that is going to be serving as a model for so many other cities around the world, which is very, very exciting. So these are the event coordinators organizing this event for you all. My name is Emmy, and I am a youth leadership coordinator for our education department, alongside Marianne Kenny. And my background, I have a field-based background. Before coming to TreePeople, I was a field technician working to conserve species and natural resources in places like Indonesia, Hawaii, and I've also worked in Thailand. And my passion is just all things nature related and conservation and youth as well, which is what brought me to TreePeople. Is that throughout all of my time being a conservationist in the field, the highlight was always those moments that I got to work with volunteers, and specifically youth. And that's because the youth, the future of our environment and the sustainability of how we move forward into the future during such critical times is really in everybody's hands, but it's going to impact the youth the most. So my passion is youth and the environment. So this is basically a dream job for me, and I'm so grateful to be hosting this event. I'm so excited. And with that, I'm gonna pass it on to Kenny to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Kenny. Thank you for joining us. I am a native Angelino. I was born and raised here in Los Angeles. Didn't really, gravitate towards nature as a high schooler. I loved playing outdoors and playing basketball and going to the beach and playing with friends, but didn't really feel compelled to make it my, line of work or my life's mission until really I started do after high school. And so went to Santa Monica College and learned, wanted to go down the environmental science path, quickly learned that I was not a scientist or going to be a scientist. So I ended up getting my undergrad in urban planning and continuing on to get a master's in urban sustainability. So I kind of found a backdoor way into the environment through a sustainable lens, but not really as a scientist. So I'm hoping that we can kind of open up the world of possibilities to you, and maybe what might pique your interest in a line of work, beyond high school, or maybe what you can even achieve while you're still in high school and get the ball rolling already. So once again, thank you for coming. We're super excited that you're here, and we're super excited to begin this engagement with you. And from here, I would like to pass it on to Maria and introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Kenny. Hi, everyone. I'm Maria. I am also a youth leadership coordinator here at TreePeople. My path toward my current career was very squiggly, as one might call it. I actually didn't know what I wanted to do when I was in high school. I knew I wanted to be of service somehow, but I didn't know how. I considered becoming a doctor, a lawyer, president, all of these other things. And I still didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was in college. And my game plan essentially became to just try a little bit of everything. I got a degree in English literature, a minor in popular culture. I took all of my elective courses in garment construction. So I learned to sew. Still didn't know what I wanted to do. Thought, well, I'll just work with children. I've always been good with them, so I'll go do that. Ended up becoming an eco-tours educator here at TreePeople, guiding mostly elementary school students through our beautiful park and giving them little lessons on all of the different cycles in nature. And I fell in love. I realized that this was something that was so crucial and important, and it was a way that I could tie all of the things that I loved doing and that I learned along the way into one, nicely packaged deal. So here I am as a youth leadership coordinator today. I get to talk about waste in the fashion industry. I get to show students how to advocate for themselves, which is what we're going to do today. And yeah, I really love what I'm doing. So happy that you're all here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maria and Kenny. So before we start, we have a little icebreaker activity for you. And this is a game that I'm sure everybody is familiar with. It's Would You Rather. So we have a few questions. Oh, wait. And they're going to be polls. So you're going to see a poll pop up. And I'm going to launch the first question. Would you rather trip at a graduation party or accidentally ruin someone's surprise party? Oh, wow. I'm seeing that most people would rather trip at graduation. That's so, well, I guess now it's half-half actually. I'll share the results afterwards. It's funny to be able to see it.
Yeah, it's looking pretty split.
Oh yeah, it is. Okay, so we have 80% people have voted, still coming in.
Still pretty split. I think I would
This is
rather
almost
trip at
an even
graduation.
split. All right, I'm gonna end the poll. These are the results. I'm gonna have to say I would also rather trip at graduation because then you can just blame yourself. I'm wondering if that's the thought process that people were having, although 25 of you did say that you'd rather ruin someone's surprise birthday party.
Accidentally, that's the key word.
Well,
That's true. It's accident. So that changes things.
And then it'll be funny. You can laugh about. You have a funny story to tell about when you later when you tell people about your graduation.
That's true.
True.
All right. Next question. Next question is, well, you can try and guess from these images. Would you rather never play video games again or never use your favorite mobile app again?
This one's a lot more split.
Might not have too many diehard gamers on here. Looks like
it's
never
starting
playing
to
video
even
games.
out.
All right, I'm gonna end the poll right here. Again, pretty even. Interesting.
Yeah, I feel go ahead.
Don't play video games, so I would definitely be fine with the first option, but oh, here's the results. Sorry, I thought I was already sharing it.
And I see that Claire is saying you can just live vicariously through someone who can play the game, which is a smart way to think about it.
All right, so we have one more. We actually have 3 more questions, but we're actually running a few minutes behind schedule at this point already. So I'm gonna do the last would you rather question, which is this one. The question being, would you rather be your family dog or a wild wolf? If you don't have a family dog, you can think of like your friend's family dog, or I don't know, any dog that you know that's a pet.
Or yeah, your family could adopt you as a dog.
Oh, that's a good one. Good one.
I'm sure somebody on here knows the Harry Potter spell for turning into a dog. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Wow.
Yeah,
I
looking
can't
pretty
believe how
split again.
split these
So
questions
interesting.
are.
Man.
All right. So I thought people would just say wild wolf because you could just roam around, I don't know, nature but if you're not the alpha, it might be rough.
That's true. And I
That's true.
feel like being a wolf would be awesome, but then I see dogs and I'm like, that's also flipping awesome. You just get to lounge around and get fed all the time.
Well, so we have 2 more questions, but I'm gonna move on, and maybe at the end, if we have enough time, we can do the last 2 questions. So before we dive into the toxic waste tour, and thank you for participating in that little icebreaker activity, I feel like we all know each other a little bit more. We would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we are on today, which is the ancestral land of the Native American people. LA, this is a little fun fact if you didn't know, but it's actually home to the highest population of indigenous people in the US and represents the ancestral land of the Tongva, the Chumash, and Tataviam people. These groups have been stewards of the land for thousands of generations across the area that we now call Los Angeles County. And through their ecological knowledge, their traditional ecological knowledge and deep connection with the land, they existed alongside nature. And, you know, today, I don't know if we can say that we are coexisting with nature. Land acknowledgement is actually a really common practice in places like Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and territories like Hawaii. I lived in Hawaii before this, and land acknowledgement was a daily thing. Even when we would take out youth to do conservation work, we would acknowledge land, and the Hawaiians would chant to the area that we were working on. And this was almost policy for a lot of the events that happened, public events that happened. And even though we are on Zoom today and we're just sitting at home, we would have loved to have this event in person. And it's still something that we want to do, is to acknowledge just the land that we are sitting on today, even in your apartment. So I just wanted to introduce this concept and also just talk about since we are talking about how we can tackle some of the environmental crises and the climate issues that we're faced today. I want to share this quote that I find to be quite powerful that I got from one of our community organizers at TreePeople. So I'm going to share it to you right here in the screen. The quote is by a professor of Native American culture, and her name is Robin Wall Kimmer. And she says, political action, civic engagement, these are powerful acts of reciprocity with the land. So of course, we're not talking just about political action today, we're talking about other actions, but I love the concept that we're giving back to the land by, using our voice to speak up against environmental justice issues and just the environmental problems that we're seeing, all of the pollutants, all of the emissions that we're seeing, just, there's countless things, the climate crisis. And I find it to be beautiful because when I lived in Hawaii, I noticed that the native Hawaiians had such a strong connection to the land. And that's something that I haven't noticed as much in Los Angeles. So they, the way that they thought their identity was very much tied with their knowledge about the native plants, their knowledge about how to read, how to read the sky, how to read the waves. And this inherently gave them a sense of responsibility to take care of the land that they're a part of. And we are also a part of land, we're part of nature. And I find that we're now living in a society in this urban setting where we're completely disconnected from a sense of connection and responsibility with our urban environment. And even though we do live in a city, it's still nature, which is why we call it the urban forest. And we just want to, we want to be stewards and look at the past and the history of Los Angeles and see what we can learn. So I don't have time. I was going to share my screen and share a cool resource, but I'm just going to place it in the chat. This website you can use to place your address, and you can find exactly what Native American territory or Indigenous or First Nations land that you're sitting on. It's a Canadian nonprofit led by Indigenous people. So a great resource for you in the chat. Check it out when you have time. And then without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Kenny, who is going to talk about toxic waste. So.
Awesome, yeah, and I'll try to jump on with my screen sharing and see how this goes. Yes.
I've paused my screen, so whenever you're ready, then go for it.
All right. Now, are y'all seeing my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay,
Yes.
cool. So thank you very much. And there's no gray square on the right side, right? Sorry, we're just working out some of these technical difficulties that we had earlier. Awesome. Wonderful. As we had already mentioned, my name is Kenny, and I am the Waste Reduction and Recycling Specialist with TreePeople, with our Environmental Education Department. And this means that I work with middle schools, I work with high schools all over Los Angeles County, mostly focused on waste projects personally. We also, as a team, focus on gardens and tree plantings and conserving water or trying to capture rainwater that falls on our campus. All these environmental projects. But the way that we facilitate or that we accompany these projects is through a three-step process that we call service learning projects. The first part of this process is to see a need. Hopefully today might expose you to some of these needs that needed to be met. And then the second thing is to learn more about it. Take a deep dive into that topic. Learn about both sides of the argument. Learn what actions are thought to help improve the situation. And then start to take that action. And so we call this three-step process a service learning project. And this is really the system that we implement these projects in. And so as we're moving through this today, we want you to start thinking of projects that might pique your curiosity, something that may be happening in your backyard or that you have a strong magnetism towards, and think about ways in which we could partner up, because ultimately at the end of the day, we at TreePeople, we at Generation Earth, our environmental education department, we are really here to be a resource for you and to help you as much as we can, whether that's to link you with other organizations or support you ourselves and show up to get our hands dirty. And we just want to let you know that we are here as a resource as we maneuver through all of these environmental topics throughout the next 2 days. So without further ado, let's jump into the Toxic Tour, which is really going to just kind of give us a glimpse of some of the industrial and human-made causes of contamination and environmental pollution that we experience here in Los Angeles today. It's definitely not intended to scare you. I know we're in the Halloween season, maybe in the Halloween spirit, but this Toxic Tour is not designed to frighten you or to scare you about your surroundings. More so to kind of raise awareness about some of these particular topics. Just acknowledge that these things are happening in our backyard. And really, we want to just inspire you to get out there and take action and take flight, even if it is on a vacuum. This is Los Angeles County. It looked like in the chat that most, if not all of us in this summit here today are from Los Angeles County. So this is our home. This is our backyard. This is where we work, we play, we go to school, we have fun. This is where life happens. And this will be our focal area for today. We're kind of going to jump around from place to place. And again, this is designed to be a tour. And I know we're not in person, but it actually allows us to travel further distances. The fact that we don't have to drive around and sit in traffic for hours. But this will kind of be our lens for today, and looking at LA County, kind of looking at Southern California. And before we even jump into any of the topics for today, I kind of want to just point out the fact that, you know, there are things to be aware of all around us. There are still 3 active landfills operating here in Los Angeles County, which means that they are still accepting waste, millions of pounds of waste on a daily basis, actually. Many landfills around here take upwards of 15 million pounds of trash on a daily basis. We know that landfills are linked to methane emissions, which are also highly linked to greenhouse gases and climate change, global warming. So we want to, of course, try to minimize waste going to landfills or minimize our exposure to them and the existence of them. This yellow X on the map is the Puente Hills landfill, which is in Puente Hills or the Whittier area. This was actually the largest landfill in the country when it closed in 2013. It has since been passed, but it's certainly nothing to brag about. But just acknowledging the fact that we have the country's now 2nd or 3rd largest landfill sitting right here within our county perimeters. We also have one of the last incinerators in all of California. California only has 2 incinerators left, and one of them is located in Long Beach. Now, you know, incinerators are ways that we burn our waste, and we try to create energy out of it, and we try to capture all of the emissions that we can from incinerators, but we know that incinerators still emit some of these greenhouse gases and other just noxious odors into the air that disturb the community and the ecosystems around it. And also we have a lot of industry here in Los Angeles, and all of these green X's on the map, you know, definitely aren't all of the industry in Los Angeles County, but it tends to reflect where industry is located more heavily, where there's more industry than other places. So, you know, if we were to maybe zoom in on this map a little bit more, I actually had intended to make this more interactive using Google Earth, and we could zoom in on all these locations and get a closer look and a closer feel for these areas and what they look like on the ground level. But technical complications had other plans, so we're not going to jump into Google Earth today how I would like to. But anyway, if we were to zoom in, we would actually see that a lot of this industry is set up right alongside the LA River. If you're familiar with how the LA River flows, it kind of comes in through downtown Los Angeles and goes almost straight south down into Long Beach. And this is also, again, where we find a lot of our industry. If we look at it on a map in terms of the income of the surrounding neighborhoods and the industry, again, these little black sections represent the industrial and the commercial sites where it's just very dense with industry, also surrounded by low-income communities. So this goes back to like the original planning of Los Angeles and trying to really set up industry alongside the river, because the river was a source of transportation, right? If you're able to have a factory right next to a river, well, then you could make products and you can get it right out on the river and ship it out immediately. So it was kind of planned to have these factories alongside the river, which is why you find so much industry along there. Which was actually part of the reason they decided to pave over the Los Angeles River, was because it tended to flood every so many years. And in order to, you know, prevent those industries alongside the river from flooding and from impacting their profits or their, you know, the economy, we decided to pave the river so that it channels the water out much more easily and that it doesn't overflow. Anyway, that's an entirely different topic that I could keep going on, but we just don't have the time today. So anyway, you will find a lot of industry alongside the path of the Los Angeles River. And with that industry, we know comes a lot of, environmental consequences and just like other consequences for the community, like noise pollution, but the air pollution, soil pollution, these are all kind of consequences of high industry and industrial zones. So it makes it hard to, bring in money for, investment into a community that's just surrounded by industry, because it's just not the most desirable of places if you had the choice. So last but not least, these are actually all, active fire zones that we're going to learn today about how fighting fires is actually a source of contamination for our local ecosystems. So again, we're not even jumping into any of these topics today, but I just wanted to paint the picture that there are, environmentally consequential things all around us, and things are happening all around us. So for today specifically, we're actually going to focus on these 3 particular stops of a tour. First, we are going to go to the city of Vernon and go check out Exide Technologies and learn about how they contaminated the soil of many communities surrounding this one particular industry. Then we're going to travel over to Baldwin Hills and the Inglewood Oil Fields and learn about how drilling for oil in an urban setting can have impacts on our air quality and on our health and on our ecosystems. And last but certainly not least, we're going to peek into the city of Anaheim and see what's going on there, because they have what we call these forever chemicals that are leaching into their water system, their drinking water. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So these are the 3 stops on our tour. Our first stop for today is, again, in the city of Vernon, which is in the southeast Los Angeles area. Again, this would be the moment that I would be hopping onto Google Earth and kind of giving you all a virtual drone flight through Los Angeles, but it seems to be a little too complicated with the being on Zoom and whatnot, and I'm having technical difficulties with my own computer. So anyway, we will just have to visualize ourselves there in the city of Vernon, again, southeast Los Angeles. But it brings us here to Exide, which is one of the world's largest producers, distributors, and recyclers of lead acid batteries. Now, lead acid batteries are used in automobiles and golf carts and forklifts and motorcycles, all sorts of locomotive machinery. And the batteries are recycled by grinding them open and neutralizing a sulfuric acid and separating these polymers from the lead and copper, all this, scientific stuff that is just really beyond me. But lead acid batteries, since they could have such a consequence on the environment, they're actually recycled more than any other material that there is, more than plastic, more than paper, more than cardboard. We recycle about 97% of lead acid batteries, which is great because we need to prevent them from leaching out into our environment in a landfill. But by having these battery recycling plants, we find that it leaches into the environment in other ways. So there are many byproducts and environmental consequences to the process of recycling these batteries. And Exide employees were also, caught dumping toxic metals and liquids into manholes on their facility. There were many instances of violations that the city and the state had found the battery recycling plant to be, violating. So, but what is the real problem here? The real problem is that by grinding down those car batteries, it creates what we call lead dust, and this lead dust gets into our air, and it flies all around us, and it just becomes part of the air. And this air dust not only goes into our lungs as humans, but it goes into the front lawns of the homes nearby, and it penetrates the soil. So although this is something that transfers through the air, we're actually finding that the soil is very heavily contaminated, and that's where a lot of our focus shifts for this conversation. So what does lead do exactly? Well, especially for children who tend to be 4 to 5 times more receptive to toxicity, like from lead toxicity. Um, Young folks tend to have more of a reaction to lead poisoning. So it's linked to the brain with things like ADHD or hearing loss or movement. It's related to hormonal disruptions. Lead poisoning is also related to stomach problems, reproductive issues, heart issues like high blood pressure, blood issues like rapid heartbeat or shortness of breath, kidney issues like kidney failure, uh, fever, drowsiness, coma, weight gain, a wide list of things. And also the development of our bones. So, as this is floating in our air and it's accumulating in our front lawns, it actually ends up, accumulating and taking a toll on more than just the air, just the soil. Just to give you a glimpse, over a 20-year period, Exide was found to be contaminating every single year for 20 years straight. And even though they were violating the laws and contaminating every year, they only paid $1 million over that 20-year stretch. And in the year 2015, Exide was kind of forced into a corner to shut down or face even more significant penalties than they had already incurred. So basically, with some community pressure and with some governmental oversight as well, Exide shut down in 2015. They had agreed to pay $38.6 million for their closure, and this was supposed to go into cleaning up the contamination from the nearby community. So cleaning up the soils and cleaning up, doing like blood tests and other types of things for the surrounding neighborhood around this battery recycling plant. But we're going to get into why that might be changing in just a few minutes. But the shutdown of the Exide battery plant wasn't only a result of these accumulating fines and violations. It was really a lot of pressure was being put on the decision makers, the stakeholders, the owners of the company, our mayor, our governor. Pressure was being put on them from the community, from the people that were living and working and breathing the air all around this industry. So these community members, they organized, they strategized on a game plan on how to try to retake their community from this industry and really prevent future generations from being exposed to this as well. So what they fought for was to, shut the place down, and that's exactly what happened. So Exide agreed to close the plant in 2015, but in a deal with federal prosecutors to avoid criminal prosecutions for years of illegal activity. So they basically got, they got the green light to just shut down and not really have to face the legal consequences of what they had done to the surrounding community. But they were at least financially responsible for, trying to right the wrongs that they had caused in the area. So this is a little map that shows, part of the cleanup process, which is basically that Exide now needs to locate individuals with high levels of lead in their body, also trying to find homes that have high levels of lead in their soil, because the lead in the soil can also have negative impacts on the plants that grow in the soil and the plants that we eat that grow in that soil. So you can see here that the green area is an area where, folks were able to get their blood tested if they were aware of the situation, if they thought that they needed to get their blood tested. Something we'll hear about is the fact that, a lot of people didn't even know this, didn't even know this was going on. So they didn't even know why they should get their blood tested or why they should get their soil tested. And in fact, we actually have a good friend of the Generation Earth family on the call now, who he actually created the flyer for this Youth Leadership Summit as well. Agent, if you're on the line, we would love to hear from you. So Agent is a community member that lives in Boyle Heights, and he has been in the middle of all of this and kind of living through this situation that we're talking about. So Agent, if you're out there, we would love to kind of get a little bit of your insight, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about your experience and what's happened as this is all rolled out over the course of, you know, how many years. Maybe you can help us learn a little bit about that.
Yeah. Hey, and thanks for having me. Hey, everyone. So yeah, so I've lived in Boyle pretty much almost my whole life, but not really until 2015 when the plant actually like closed down did I really know that things were being like polluted in the air and in the soil and everything. And pretty much like when most people in my area, I feel like, found out, you know, of course there were people who were protesting it beforehand and organizing it beforehand, but I think my perception was that it wasn't necessarily like general knowledge. And so when I feel like I really got that sense of it really being like more commonplace as far as to what was going on with the Exide thing was when we kind of got like a little flyer like this from the city. This is actually the one that I got in 2015. And it kind of basically outlines like that there is lead in the soil from the Exide plant, but it doesn't necessarily go into too much detail as to like how that lead is going to affect, you know, your body or the development of kids, or, you know, what it does to them, or the long lasting effects of the lead or anything like that. But you know, they do say in the pamphlet that there is like free lead testing and stuff like that. But you know, I kind of feel like I had to do my own research to pretty much understand the gravity of this situation. And I feel like the LA Times was really on top of this story as far as like the exposure goes. And so I want to say, like, as far as the more detailed information about what was going on in the community, that's probably where you would get your information from.
From like the LA Times articles.
Yeah, and there were some, you know, of course there were people that were like community organizing. And I know more recently they started holding, you know, maybe last year they started holding town hall meetings here. But in my opinion, that's kind of like way after the fact. And I feel like they were being held at times when a lot of people didn't really have access to going to those meetings. It'll be during the day, or, you know, like a lot of people in this area are working class. And they have to work during the day. And by the time they get home, you know, they have to take care of, you know, the family or their kids or whatever. So, you know, like they don't necessarily have a whole lot of time to devote to something like this, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that kind of adds like a communication barrier as well, right? Not being able to hear the voices from the community, which may or may not speak English, right? Maybe there's like some language barriers there as well.
Yeah. We did, you know, when we did get those flyers, they are in English and in Spanish, but, you know, I feel like as far as like my own experience goes and the experience of other people that I know, a lot of people and their parents like didn't have the opportunity to finish going to school, or, you know, the opportunity to get some form of higher education. And I feel like a lot of those, a lot of these documents are kind of written in this, you know, in that more legal language, you know. And like I said, like a lot of people just never really had the opportunity to really maybe grasp how serious the situation was. I know Maria had kind of mentioned that in her experience, you know, sometimes she had to explain certain things to her family. And I feel like you know, maybe a lot of people in this community don't have somebody there to really help them work through, you know, all these documents or whatever, or pretty much work through, you know, the whole situation, whether they don't have time or they don't, you know, necessarily grasp the situation.
Yeah, so what it sounds like I'm hearing is that even though Exide, you know, may have tried to make some sort of, you know, cleanup process happen, that it probably was too late. First of all, definitely too late, not rolled out in time or in a timely manner. That there were, you know, several communication, you know, limitations, whether it was that they set up their meetings during work hours during the week, or that they were kind of presenting the information in this legal jargon that was, you know, just super complex and hard to understand for anybody to read, let alone if you're trying to translate into Spanish or any other language. And then, you know, also just a lack of real investment, you know, in terms of money, but also time. I think, you know, with such a critical issue going on, flyers left on a doorstep one time isn't really an urgent call to you know, raise awareness or to get things done. So it seems as if, you know, although there were some actions taken, that it wasn't really geared or catered to the community. It was almost probably just, you know, whatever was convenient for Exide to roll out. Does that sound about fair?
Yeah, you had mentioned that you know, they kind of only it started to they only closed down because they had pressure from the community and from the government. And I feel like their attempt to clean up the community was pretty much an exact reaction in the same way, where it's like they're only apologizing and trying to fix the situation because they got caught, type of thing.
Sure.
You know?
Sure. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's where that community organizing and action definitely comes into place. And we've got to move on to the next stop of our tour. But is there anything else that you would like to add, just to kind of wrap this up and get out any last you know, sentiment on this, Agent?
Yeah, I would pretty much just like to say that, like, you know, no one is necessarily going to advocate for your community as well as you can. I know there are a few people in here that were from Long Beach, or you know, some other areas that are kind of similar to mine, that Inglewood, you know, that you know, they could probably be going through very similar things, not necessarily with the Exide plant, but, you know, every community needs something, and you are the best person to assess what your community needs. And, you know, kind of taking action on that, or speaking up, or, you know, doing what you can is it, not to put too much pressure, but sometimes it might have to fall on you, because, you know, these are your people, you know what I mean? And no one is going to really, like, take care of them as well as you can and know what they need. And you know, sometimes you have to remind people that when these things happen, or when when things like the Exide plant happen, you have to put a face to the problem, you know, and remind people that this is happening to real people. But yeah, that's all I got to say.
Absolutely, and beautifully said. Thank you so much, Agent. Oh my gosh, round of applause. Thank you for taking the initiative to just step on this platform of the summit and to share your perspective. I think it's vital for, you know, us to get the perspective from the insiders, and to not just talk about it from an awareness standpoint as an outsider, but to, you know, understand what's happening on the ground. And I wish we had more time to hear more about all of this, but unfortunately the train must go on. So once again, thank you so much, Agent, and gosh, best of luck moving forward with all of this, because as we're about to find out, this community definitely needs some luck, or some fortitude, some will, because right now in the courts, court decisions are being made to actually allow Exide to kind of step away from the cleanup of their old facility. So just a couple of weeks ago, this was in the LA Times, that Exide may be allowed to abandon toxic battery recycling plant and massive cleanup bill. Even more recently, just about a week ago, it was decided that they were basically off the hook, that a Vermont court decided that Exide, filing for bankruptcy, also cleared their responsibility of cleaning up the contaminated surrounding neighborhoods. Now, it doesn't just end with that court hearing. We have to go back to organizing and taking action. This court ruling can be overturned. This is not a final, the last straw, the last word, the last decision. This can still be overturned. Action can still be taken to reverse that and have the money be redirected back into the cleanup. And it's going to take that same sort of pressure that was put on Exide from the beginning to shut down and to clean up their mess to begin with. So anyway, we must move on, but it's just really to say that this is not over, but it's still happening in real time. And another instance that is also happening in real time right now is in the Inglewood Oil Fields. So really, I would love to take you on a stroll throughout the history of oil in Los Angeles, but we're a little crunched on time right now. So I'll at least just tell you that the Inglewood Oil Fields actually first began way back in 1924, which is when this picture was taken. But oil drilling here in Los Angeles actually started in the 1800s. I believe in the 1880s, where our the first location that we tapped in for oil was in what we now call Echo Park. So Echo Park was where we first started to drill oil, but we've drilled in several other places, down all the way down into Long Beach. Venice Beach used to have oil rigs right alongside the shore. All the way up into Santa Clarita has oil that we drill up there. So there are, numerous locations that we drill for oil here in Los Angeles County, but none that are larger and in more of an urban setting than the Inglewood Oil Fields. So currently, this is the largest urban oil drilling field in all of the United States, located right here in Los Angeles. Now, we have over 550 active wells, and we drill up for millions of barrels of oil each year. And during this process of extracting the oil from the ground, there are environmental consequences, mostly in the air. There are noxious fumes and toxic fumes that happen when we are actively drilling for oil, when trucks are coming to pick up the oil, even when we cap an oil rig that actually still has the potential to leach out contaminant air pollution into surrounding communities. So if we look at it, those noxious fumes, those toxic fumes can impact our health in a number of ways. It can impact it can give us runny nose, nosebleeds, eye irritation, headaches, dizziness, respiratory ailments. It can mess up our endocrine system, cause strokes, cardiovascular issues, cancer, and premature mortality as well. It also impacts our environment. We can spill the oil directly into our environment, contaminating our soils and our waters. Again, it also contaminates our airs. And if we look at the race of the socioeconomic background of the communities that surround the Inglewood oil fields, it's largely it's 52% African American in the surrounding area of the Inglewood oil fields. So in terms of all of Los Angeles County, African Americans make up 8% of the entire LA County population, but in terms of the immediate surrounding communities that surround the oil field, it is 52% African American, meaning this becomes an environmental injustice or a environmental racism even. Again, I'm going to kind of speed through these slides, but this is just to show that this is organizing happening in real time. People are on the ground right now organizing, talking, strategizing about how we can shut this down, how we can reverse these consequences. And currently the city of Culver City is in the midst of doing that, of shutting down their wells. So the city of Culver City has land that has about 15 or 20 oil wells on it. So not very many, but they are on Culver City land. And Culver City, basically, because of they're receiving pressure from the community, because they are receiving all of this, negative feedback from community members, they have found a way to make it so that the drilling for oil, those oil wells, don't fall in line with the zoning of that particular community. So community members, fight for what they want particular areas to be zoned for. And they fought for this particular area to not be zoned for oil drilling. So pretty much Culver City is trying to figure out the legal way that they can stop drilling for oil on their land because it's having such negative impacts on our air and our surrounding communities. Again, the fight is ongoing. We must, continue to organize and fight towards this cause. It's something that, just because Culver City is doing their part doesn't mean that we can't shut them down in Baldwin Hills too, which is where more of those wells are taking place. So again, and lastly, on this tour, we're going to travel down to Anaheim, which is where, just as recently as a year ago, this article came out in the LA Times saying that nearly 300 drinking water wells and other water sources in California have traces of toxic chemicals linked to cancer. But what are these toxic chemicals? We call them PFAS, or per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. And they're actually found in pretty common items that we see every day. So they're found in cardboard, especially cardboard that's trying to prevent liquids from seeping out, like with foods. They're in a lot of our clothing as fire retardants to prevent us from spontaneously combusting into flames. And remember, I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation how these fire active areas are also areas for contamination. Like I had brought up on the screen here, all those orange X's. Well, when we are fighting fires, there are actually these PFAS chemicals in our firefighting foams and our sprays that we use to fight these fires. So we are directly contaminating our soils by fighting these fires with the firefighting sprays and soaps. Also aerosol things, aerosol cans and things like spray paint have these forever chemicals in them. And same thing with bioplastics, these things that we are making from things like cornstarch that imitate plastic, but they're not really the same thing. They actually have these forever chemicals. And the reason that these chemicals are important, or why they're called forever, is that they bioaccumulate, meaning we can't flush them out. They accumulate in our bodies. They're not water soluble. They're not oil soluble. So these substances, they pile up in our body. We can eat them. We can be exposed to them through the air, as you can see here on this little breakdown. And I'm trying to wrap this up quick so we can move on to the next section. But basically, we can be exposed to it directly from the products that we wear and that we use. It can be exposed to us through firefighting, getting those PFAS chemicals into the soil. Through waste in landfills or incinerators. Those PFAS chemicals are still going to be in there, and they're going to leach their way into our environment, which is what we are seeing in the drinking water for the city of Anaheim. And they found that the water that was contaminated was actually coming from the San Bernardino water recycling plant. So even though they had already treated the water, it was these recycling facilities for water weren't designed to capture these chemicals. So they actually slip right through the filtration systems, and we're not able to capture them. This is not just a problem here in LA or in Anaheim. Recently, Texas, put a lot of attention towards PFAS chemicals contaminating their biosolids. This is a quick demonstration to show that by fighting fires, it can contaminate our soils, it can contaminate our groundwater, it can contaminate our surface water, which means our drinking water and our irrigating water, and it can also just go straight into the air. So these PFAS chemicals come from everywhere. And they're also, since they are forever chemicals and they don't break down in the environment, they don't break down in our bodies, we're actually finding them worldwide, and we're actually finding more PFAS chemicals in places like the Antarctic or Alaska, where there's not even any industry around. They're accumulating in these far, far away places that, we're impacting from our actions here in civilization. So that's it for the toxic tour today. I apologize because that was a little bit rushed and that we didn't get to fully dive into the Google Earth how I had imagined. But really, again, just wanting to paint the picture of, things that we can take action on and things that are happening right in our backyard, things that are actionable. And as we continue on with our presentations for the rest of today and tomorrow, keep these things in mind of like, you know, what might activate you or what might you feel so compelled to take action on. So without further ado, I would like to lead us into our next section to find out how we might be able to make change with advocacy or policy. So Maria, if you could be so kind to take it away. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Kenny. Yes, we're going to talk about environmental advocacy and policy. As I mentioned earlier, when I was in high school, I considered becoming the president. And to this day, I still believe that change has to be, I can't think of a better way to say it, but an inside job. And we have representatives, we're part of this representative government, but our representatives can't possibly know what we're going through 100% unless we speak out and make our voices heard. So I thought it would be really important to have a piece on advocacy and policy. As part of this, we've created an advocacy toolkit that is meant to be a supplemental material to today's presentation, in which we are you're going to be able to see everything that the presentation covers in the toolkit. There are note sections for you to take notes if you wish. There's resources, links, everything you need to know is you can find right there in that advocacy toolkit. And if I'm not mistaken, somebody should have put that in the chat for you all now, so you can access it. This toolkit was created specifically for this event, and it was created with the help of Stephen. So thank you, Stephen. I wanted to shout you out and let you know that you're a real one. To go further into depth on all of this, I thought, who better than our Director of Policy Initiatives, Manny Gomez. So Manny, please take it away.
Thank you, Maria. Welcome, everybody. I am thrilled to be here with you all today. I help oversee policy and research at TreePeople, and it's a big responsibility and a big job, but I love it every day, and I love advocacy and organizing even more. So let's talk about that. So I think one big thing to talk about when you're talking about advocacy or organizing is your personal story, right? So why your personal story? And the bottom line is that's foundational and powerful because people are moved by your story, by storytelling, and by purpose, not by data or details, right? And so let's go through one example. And so one example is I'll share my personal story. Like Agent, I grew up in Boyle Heights. I was raised by a single mother. And at that time, Boyle Heights, very different than it is today, suffered from the nation's highest levels of crime, poverty, and environmental justice issues. Looks a little different today. And I knew at an early age, as I started learning more about all the systemic issues that were going on around me in my neighborhood, that I needed to make changes from the inside, as Maria said, right? Better to be, for some, inside the decision-making rooms and outside agitating. And so that was a decision that I made. So I went on, I studied philosophy, political science at UCLA, and I also earned a master's in public administration, which I thought would be helpful as I carried this out. But most importantly, throughout my studies and career, I volunteered and I worked for candidates and elected officials that would help me make those changes. And so some of these folks include former mayor, LA Mayor Antonio Verragosa, President Barack Obama, current LA Mayor Eric Garcetti, Congresswoman Lucille Roybal Allard, who actually helped, I was by her side back in 2013 when she was starting the public process of shutting down Exide, which we heard of. That was a great history, and it just brought me back to so many memories back then. And that was East LA College, 2013. And the setting was just so powerful because for once we had people at the table who actually let their voice be heard. I also worked for Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, amongst others. So that's my personal story. Now I love to learn what you all think about advocacy. So next slide, please. Okay, so let's go on Menti, put in this code, and then quickly, in one word, what do you think describes advocacy? And we'll give it a minute or two, see what the results are.
So yeah, if everyone could go to menti.com on your web browser and put in the code. I just put it in the chat so you could copy and paste it. And you can put words to answer this question.
See, it was the fastest typer here. Then as you put it in, it'll just populate on this word cloud. There we go. Keep them coming.
It's great to see these coming in. These are some awesome words that stir up a lot of emotions for me.
Wow. Okay. Well, it sounds like I should just turn this over to you all. You have a great idea what advocacy is. So thank you for that. So we have action, awareness, community, strength, support, foundational, direction, standing up. Yes, all great things, activism. So in a nutshell, I like to think about advocacy as working towards supporting a cause that you believe in. Going back to you, your personal story, right? Whatever is important for you. Next slide, please. Okay, so before we start, now that we kind of have the foundation, we have a working definition, maybe let's talk about the importance of knowing your issue, right? So you have to know your issue and your representative, otherwise things will get lost in the shuffle. You have to be talking to the right people, and the issue will always determine your route to advocacy. And some of these representatives are gonna be your federal lawmakers, state and local. I did provide in the chat, we'll drop it here soon. There'll be a link, we'll click on it, and we could actually look at how you could be an effective advocate by identifying your issue, right? Because it matters depending on the layers of your issue. You know, you have to know your issue in order to know your representative. And one way you can recognize that is by kind of learning which representatives actually have more influence over particular issues, right? So some of that is, for example, if you're looking to support AOC's Green New Deal, that's a federal issue, right? But then locally at the state level, maybe you want to combat climate change, right? So you want to support urban forestry funding. And for example, that will lead to planting of lots of trees. And that's a state level issue. And then going on with some of the examples, Mayor Garcetti has his version of the local Green New Deal, which is another local issue. And then for example, like school greening projects, maybe you want to look to University of California, Cal State University, there's the California Community Colleges, and then LUSD School Board of Education. So all these different governmental bodies all have one important thing, is that they have control over a budget, right? So you want to make sure you're talking to the right people. And if we could just click on that link, I could show you how you could actually find these people. And we will, for this exercise, just be using TreePeople's address. So you could see who are the representatives for TreePeople. So there we go. We can start with the first one. And this will be your local one. And this one is very important because it'll lay out, oh, if we could just populate our address in there, TreePeople's, that'll be helpful, I think, just to kind of get a sense. Okay. Okay, let's see who are. Okay, so this is very helpful. So this tells you starting with the mayor all the way down, right? City council is important. You have Councilmember Kokorian there. You have your county supervisor, Sheila Kuehl. You have your state senator, Bob Hertzberg, all the way down Assembly, Congress, LUSD School Board. So this is very foundational because this tells you exactly who these folks are. And when you click on it, you can get contact info. Thank you, Maria. Maybe if we could go back and then quickly look at some of the other examples. We could skip county since we already know, maybe do state. State would be a good example, I think.
Manny, could you share that link in the chat?
Which link?
Um,
I think Maria.
Maria's doing it.
Yeah. Okay, so there you go. So here here are the two representatives that represent tree people. So if we want to talk about that urban forestry budget, we'll click on them, and then we'll be able to talk to those folks, right? And their staff and say, hey, where's the urban forestry dollars? We need more trees. And then maybe it'll be helpful, Maria, if we could go see the federal real quick. Should be the last one. And then just California. And then here you have our senators, Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris. So same thing, you'll click here, and then on all these tabs, I don't want to go through each and every one of them, but wherever it says contact or staff, that's usually where you could find the info. And then it'll be like a general info email. But what we want to do to get their attention is always go to the people who run their policy, their chief of staff, or their directors. So the field directors, because these are the folks that really understand these issues and will have the elected's ears on these issues. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we saw our senator, one of our senators, Dianne Feinstein. Here's a video. We just want to click on this real quick. We'll let that go. And this is why your voice matters. This is a powerful example of this, a youth-led organization I'm sure you're all aware of that advocates for political action on climate change. And so this is an example where they got their issue and their concerns directly in front of our California senator and actually just showed up at our office. So let's see what happens.
Go in and share this letter, and we're going to do it all together. Yeah. Share it in front of Feinstein. Okay. We're asking her to vote yes on the Green New Deal.
We are trying to ask you to vote yes on the Green New Deal.
Please.
Okay, I'll tell you what. We have our own Green New Deal.
Some scientists have said that we have 12 years to turn this around.
Well, it's not going to get turned around in 10 years. What we can do,
Senator, if this doesn't get turned around in 10 years, you're looking at the faces of the people who are going to be living with these consequences.
The government is supposed to be for the people and by the people and all for the people.
You know what's interesting about this group is I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what I'm doing. You come in here and you say it has to be my way or the highway. I don't respond to that. I've gotten elected. I just ran. I was elected by almost 1 million vote plurality. And I know what I'm doing. So, you know, maybe people should listen a little bit.
I hear what you're saying, but we're the people who voted you. You're supposed to listen to us. That's your job.
How old
I'm
are
16.
You?
I
well,
can't
you didn't vote for me.
Well, I'm 24.
It doesn't matter. We're the ones who's going to be impacted.
Something.
It doesn't matter. We're going to be the ones who are impacted.
I understand that. I have 7 grandchildren. I understand it very well.
Senator, the cost of not taking this action is far higher than the cost of what the Green New Deal will be. And there is enormous popularity for this bill around the whole country. And we're asking you to be brave and do this for us and for your grandchildren.
Get enough for everyone. I'm trying to do the best I can, which was to write a responsible resolution.
Any plan that doesn't take bold, transformative action is not going to be what we need.
Well, you know better than I do. So I think one day you should run for the Senate.
Great,
and then you do it your way.
But by that time,
in the meantime,
there's going to be a big problem.
I just won a big election.
Okay. Next slide, please. So that's a perfect example of why your voice matters, getting the attention of our US Senator. Obviously, her response was not great, but the action there was pretty powerful, right? They show up at her office and really demand and put their issues in front of her. So here, let's talk about ways to advocate. And so what I have here is basically how you could advocate and organize around the issues we talked about that you care about, right? And so some of that is going to take considerable amount of time and others not so much. And so starting with petition signing, if we could just click on the link and you should see it. So this is one type of action you could take, right? This is an easy one. So it's going by the amount of time commitment. So you could click on something, click on this link, change.org, and you could either sign someone's petition, and back to the issues, there we go. See, issues, what do you care about? And so you could create your issue or sign on to someone else's. And this is one way you could do this, which literally takes a second. And then the next thing is social media, which I'm not gonna go through because we all live in social media and you guys are experts of it. So social media platforms, but I will pause and just give it the attention it deserves because it is important, right? So social media platforms are so important nowadays that now some of these the biggest tech firms like Facebook, Twitter are censoring people and their political speech because all the misinformation, and they know how powerful it is. And in fact, our current president just said in an interview that, but for social media, he may not be our president. And so I just wanted to not just gloss over that because it is important and is very effective tool now. Letter writing, we have a personal example here that TreePeople led around urban forestry. We'll click on that and show you, and we can walk through that. So this is a letter that TreePeople, and if we can scroll down a little bit, could see, no, I'm sorry, up. Us and about 11 of our urban forestry partners in LA County. So we wrote this letter, colleagues and I, and we wanted to really get in front of the mayor and city council to say, hey, as you plan for the next budget season, please don't forget urban forestry. It's an urgent issue, so urgent we're writing this letter, and we're getting sign on and buy-in from some of our biggest partners who also are interested in urban forestry. So you can see some of the elements of this letter. We send it email, but we address it formally with the subject line, right? Mayor's 2020-2021 budget. And then in there, what you want to do is just set the framing, like what is it you're asking for? Be very clear. And then also give some very persuasive comments, right? As to why, right? So we want to have some evidence. So we talk about the mayor's own priority. He talked about LA's new Green Deal and that we strongly encourage that. And we're also big partners. And he has this very ambitious, goal to plant 90,000 trees. Well, we can't get there without money and partnership. And so that's the first bullet, like, hey, Mayor, remember your goal. We're TreePeople. We and all our colleagues are with you and our partners. And then we go down and talk about other issues, which is like an urban forestry management plan to actually care for these trees, maintain them, all the way down to, and then based on the order, not of importance, but really the different things we want. And then we just sign off. And then we copy all of city council leadership there, starting with the city council president, Nuri Martinez, and then below her, council member Paul Kokorian, who oversees the budget and the budget committee, all the way down to their key staff. Remember, back to my point, when you do this outreach, you want to make sure you're talking to the right people. You don't want to send this to the communications director because they're going to say, hey, why are you sending me this? But if you send it to their policy people, they'll know exactly what you're talking about, and they'll be able to hopefully take action on your request. Okay, so if we could go now to the next example. Peaceful protests, again, I don't want to belabor that. We've all seen it. We're living it, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, very powerful and also very effective, right, in numbers, and takes commitment. Another example would be meeting one-on-one with lawmakers. Also takes time commitment. It takes the organizing, it takes the communication with the office, letting them know what your priorities are, and then getting that meeting, which is half the battle. And then the other way is testimony. So if we could click on that, we could show you a powerful picture of this. So testimony before, back to my point, any governmental body that has budgetary decision-making authority, right? Because you don't want to talk to people if they can't actually fund stuff. And so this is a powerful example at the highest levels of Mark Zuckerberg, CEO and founder of Facebook, before Congress, feeling the pressure, and they're all wanting to know, what are you doing to secure people's privacy? And are you too big? Should we start regulating you, Mark? And you could tell he's sweating bullets there and not too happy, but that is part of the process, is testimony. The next would be supporting candidates. So we want to support candidates, as I mentioned in my personal story that I care about. And then lastly, we could click on the last thing here. You can run for office, right? Maria's going to be president. I'd love to help her get elected. And anyone else, just like Barack Obama and his family here, this is a beautiful picture that I love that really captures 2008, right? So 2008 in his South Side of Chicago with his family, what could be more beautiful than that? And that's, for me, I think the order, right? So you could click or create that petition all the way to the different steps of letter writing, peaceful protests, meeting with lawmakers, testimony, and then why not? If all your efforts aren't being heard, you should run for office. And then you get to make the decisions. So that's my presentation. I left some time so we could take any questions folks have. So Maria, do you want to go through if there are any questions? Open it up. No question's a bad question.
Of course. Let me open up the chat so I can take a look. Any questions from anyone for Manny or for anyone here on the staff? Let's see. Well, Destiny just let me know privately that she would want to be president too. So, you know, I'll hit you up to be my vice president if you promise to do the same for me. Yeah, go for it, Destiny. That's right, Ariel. Any questions for Manny?
Looks like
Don't
somebody
be shy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know Manny's a director, so it seems like he might be intimidating, but he's actually not intimidating at all. He's very nice. So feel free to ask away. There's a raised hand. Okay, let's see. I can't see the participants list, so let's see.
Yeah, I saw Chibuzo had a raised hand. You want to go ahead
Go
and
ahead.
introduce yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey.
Okay. Thank you. And I just had a question about the petitions you were showing us. I didn't get the link.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So we'll get the link. I think we could put every link on here. Probably just not our petition. We could send a PDF around of our letter. But every other link we could put in there. Can we put it in? There we go.
Yeah, we're gonna actually send a follow-up email with all of the links and all the toolkit and all that stuff for you to have. So if you don't see those coming into the chat now, then you will be getting them in an email after the fact.
What other questions do you all have?
Let's see one that just came in through the chat from Cami. Do you know of any ways people can start program or projects in their own community for the environment?
That's a great question. Yes. And so I think on the elected official list, so if you go to that first link that we'll put in the chat and we have, so remember that first one, we saw the mayor all the way down. Somewhere on that page, you have at the most basic level, your neighborhood council members. So your neighborhood council members are your neighbors who said, hey, I want a program. No one's listening to me. They run for office and they also have a budget. And so you could start there at the local level if you really want a program in your backyard. Other ways you could do that is basically talking to either organizations like us who already have existing programs and say, hey, I want to partner. How did you do that? How did you start your urban garden in Arleta? I want to know. And then they'll give you some details. But I think that's the easiest way, is starting at the neighborhood council level and talking to other folks who are already doing programs that are similar to yours or that kind of reflect what you want to do in some way. And please, everyone should chime in here. It's not just for me. I want this to be interactive.
And I see, Manny, that somebody asked, what was your biggest advocacy win?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say helping restart the process of shuttering Exide 2013. That was a long and belabored process that lots of advocates and folks had done for years. And then when I got to the Congresswoman's office, I said, we need to go back to there. Like, how do we organize around that? And so I did the research, I wrote the briefing, we did it, and it was a community win. But like Agent said, the community had been the loudest, organizers and advocates for this for so long. And it was just, some of those stories are just horrendous. One example is because of what Kenny had mentioned, how they weren't going to be held criminally liable. I was looking to see like how far is that Exide plant to the LA River, and ends up being it's 0.8 miles away. But I only found that factoid in their own legal papers that were presented by their attorneys. And so I think, but for those efforts, 2012 at 13, 14, I think that Exide plant would probably still be operating as it did for, 70 plus years. Good question.
Yeah. And great answer to you too, Manny. That it's so interesting to hear you talk about how you advocated for that and essentially brought to sort of justice something that is so it's been made such a big difference in the lives of so many.
Manny, I have a question. So I noticed, with 2020, all of the social justice uprising that we've seen over the past, 6 months, there were a lot of petitions going around on social media, and I saw some people posting about the effectiveness of it and others posting about the non-effectiveness of it. And there seemed to be, I don't know, split opinions. And I did read up on it myself, and I read that it could be like a gateway advocacy into doing more things. And also if you get, for example, the George Floyd petition was, I think, the biggest petition ever. And so I just wanted to ask like your opinion on petition signing, and because it's such an accessible way to advocate, your thoughts on that, and just some context, because you're obviously, so much more experience in the advocacy field, and I just want to know what you have to say about petitions, really.
Yeah, I think petitions I view it as, you have your sack of arrows on your back, and that's one arrow, and that shouldn't be your only arrow. So use that arrow, but at the same time, you should be having conversations with the folks, and I'm going to belabor it because I like to stay on message, who have the budget authority to use to change things, because without money, you can't change things. And so I think you should have the petition signing, you should create them, you should sign on, you should share widely, but then at the end of that process, whatever that number is, whether it's 100 or 100 million, you then take that number and you advocate for your cause and say, hey, look at these, this is who cares about this, because we have it in the petition. And also you can't ignore our voices, because what you want to do is they get micro, like how many of those people live in these districts? Who lives in your neighborhood in Boyle Heights? Who lives in Studio City, right? Who lives in Watts? And then you make the case, the persuasive case. Look, these people live here, they're your constituents, they vote for you. You work at the pleasure of the people who voted you in office. So I think that's one way, but I think that shouldn't be the only way. By all means, you should always take the all hands on deck approach.
Awesome. There's a really great question from Bliss in the chat. Do you need a college and master's degree to run for office?
No, you do not. You absolutely do not. But there is a fun fact about, at least in Congress, our US Congress, both on the US Senate side and the House Representative side, about 60%, a little more than 60% of those folks, almost 70, have a Juris Doctorate. So they did go to law school, because it just helps with your thinking, with your analytical skills, and then you're just looking at laws and bills all day, right? But outside of that, even then, you don't have to, right? You don't have to have a master's degree or professional degree. You just, in my view, you just need the passion and the conviction to want to change things.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Manny.
Yes, and with that, I think it's time for us to go on to the next topic, which is our Green Career Panel. And I'm going to hand over the mic to Emmy, who's going to be moderating that Green Career Panel. And I think that's a perfect segue, speaking of educations and degrees and what you need in order to become a policymaker, taking it on to some different types of careers that also deal with the green field and tackling all of these environmental and social justice issues.
Awesome. Yeah. So now it's time for a Green Career Panel. We have our 3 guests. Maria, could you just go to the next slide, and then we can let the speakers share their screens. So our 3 panelists today are Brian Matsumoto from Nature for All, which is another LA-based nonprofit. And we have Tashana Giles-Jones, who is a Green Ambassadors teacher, an environmental teacher based out of Inglewood, the Environmental Charter Middle School in Inglewood. And then we have Eileen Garcia, who is our very own TreePeople regional manager of tree care and tree planting operations of Southeast LA. So we're going to have 10-minute presentations from each of the panelists, and then there will be a 15 to 20-minute Q&A at the end, which is meant to be a discussion, a live discussion. You can unmute yourselves and ask a question to any one of the 3 panelists or any other staff on this call today. So if you have questions that come up, you can put them in the chat as well, but there will be a Q&A session. So first we have Brian, who's going to be presenting and introducing himself. So Brian, we're gonna let you take the mic.
Hi, folks. Good afternoon. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks, Emmy, for having me, and super looking forward to talking with all the other panelists as well. Once again, my name is Brian Matsumoto. Greetings to everyone out there. I'm a program organizer at Nature for All. So we're based here in LA County, and our mission is to ensure that everyone, no matter where you live in LA County, has access to nature and all the awesome benefits of it. I want to start with kind of where I began real quick. That's us. We used to be called San Gabriel Mountains Forever, and obviously, you know, President Obama in the bottom left corner. What we're probably most famous for is getting the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument created, and President Obama signed that declaration in 2014. So we were one of the major community groups that really pushed and lobbied for our Congress members and community members to support that. And we're also a coalition, which means we're like a force of lots of different organizations, which you see in the bottom. So I'm born and raised in Temple City, California. That's me in the little sailor suit there, my mom and dad. And when I reflect on it, a thing that really was important to me growing up was that I grew up in our family's nursery. It's the San Gabriel Nursery and Florist. It's my uncles and aunts, and it's one of the oldest remaining Japanese American nurseries in LA. But I think that's where I got a lot of my connection to plants and nature. Also just dealing with the public and getting more comfortable talking to folks. And I think that rooted me in a lot of community. In high school, I really got involved in community service, and with a couple of friends created this club, which still exists today at my Temple City High School. It was called Kaleidoscope. And even back then, you know, you all know there's like so many things to work on in society and the environment, and we wanted to do our part. So even the skills that you get from school and volunteering really carry forward to you and give you a lot of experience, and that helped me kind of come out of my shell. I ended up in UCLA for undergrad, and I think the whole theme of my talk is like, I definitely did not have one set thing and I went straight for it. My path to my career was all over the place, but all those things really built up my life story. So I went in undeclared. I thought I might do social science, history, and then I found design. And I thought I wouldn't be eligible because I didn't have a huge art background, but I was a creative person, made friends in the department, started taking classes here and there, and kind of worked my way in forcefully into the design department. And a lot of those graphic design skills I really use today, but I moved out of that career because I started to feel like this might be unfulfilling, creating advertisements for other people, essentially. I wanted to serve the community more. So I found a program, an AmeriCorps program called Public Allies. That really changed my life. It was a social justice fellowship here in LA. I worked at a charter school for a couple years, and then I found landscape architecture. So for those who don't know, landscape architects are the folks who design basically anything outdoors, outside of a building. So I went to Cal Poly Pomona and got my master's there because I was interested in becoming a park designer. And so for basically almost 10 years, I worked designing parks. This is one of the early ones. You know, my boss designed most of this. You know, I did little things like in the bottom left, graphic design. I designed that interpretive signage. This whole park is in Duarte called Encanto Park. It's an all native planting. We had artists create that bird sculpture on the bottom. I got to select the stone that made benches. And that career is really fulfilling because it combines design with creating spaces for the public and nature. So I really loved it. And another thing I want to talk about is doing cool things. While I was in school, my boyfriend was like, "We got to get out of here. Let's go work for the summer in Yellowstone." And so I really encourage you all to just explore the world, find these cool programs that pay you. They might not pay much, but you really get to get outside of your bubble and explore the world. So I went to work for Yellowstone National Park, made so many friends from around the world, explored Glacier National Park, and this was 2007, so that's 13 years ago. In 2010, that was 3 years later, after I graduated with my master's, we did another it's crazy, let's drive across the country. And we worked for the Maine Conservation Corps, which is another AmeriCorps program. And so I was the oldest person in this group. I would just encourage you to find these cool things. It was probably the best experience of my life. We built rock steps in the mountains. Our lunch spot was that waterfall. We cooked outdoors. That was our commute in the bottom, walking across that river. Really changed my life. And so finally, a few years ago, I went through Nature for All's Leadership Academy. And through that, you learn lobbying skills, you learn how to advocate for your community. And I was lucky enough to be sent to Washington, D.C. for one lobbying trip. You can see Kamala Harris's office down in the bottom. And it was a really awesome experience. And eventually, I was lucky enough to get a job with Nature for All. And these are some snapshots of what I do today. Sometimes I'm a community teacher in our leadership development class. So we teach folks how to advocate, how to get more green space in their community, and how to feel comfortable speaking to their elected officials. These are a few photos. We talk about parks. We talk about where water comes from, a lot like TreePeople. And the coolest thing I did was getting to take my class on a tour of the watershed and visit these real places so that folks can see where their water comes from. And we build advocates out in the community to create parks. And now the real thing I focus on is called the San Gabriel Mountains Transit Infrastructure Program. This is all about trying to connect our Gold Line and create buses and shuttles that will get you folks out into nature, into the mountains. So this is kind of a presentation I give, but you can see, I do a lot of writing, I do a lot of presenting, I do a lot of convincing people that these things are important and that they should care about them and give us funding to do these things. So all those skills that I developed in many different parts of my life, they have all become very handy. This is kind of my baby, a line that we're trying to create a bus route that goes all the way up to Mount Wilson and takes folks hiking along the way. So my design skills come in because we need to build shuttle stops, a lot of design planning. I guess the thing I want to close with is I never thought I was going to be doing this exact thing I'm doing now. But I think if you follow your passion, if you volunteer for organizations that do stuff you care about, you'll really get to find your way and find all the interesting, cool things folks are doing. And you'll find the right people to work with, because that's a lot of what it's all about. My email's down at the bottom, and I'm happy to, talk to you folks. And Tashonda, take it away.
Thank you, Brian. That was a great story. And I didn't know that you did AmeriCorps and all these things, but we can discuss about it more in the Q&A, but we will hand off the mic to Tashonda. Thank you, Brian, for sharing.
Hi, everyone. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you and see if my tech savviness stays intact after a full day of teaching. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen. Again, my name is Tashonda Giles Jones, and I am a teacher. I like to also consider myself an environmental educator because my teaching extends outside of the classroom. and I'm going to talk to you today about green careers. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a map of where I'm going to go. I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey, and then talk about what the future of green might look like for you, especially going into school and majoring in specific industries or careers, and then talking a little bit about cultivating your passion. So my journey. I was born in New York, but raised in Seattle, Washington, which I contribute a great deal of my love for nature on being raised in that particular location. Seattle is, if you've never been there, make sure it hits your bucket list. It's a beautiful space in North America and the Pacific Northwest. It has an incredible wealth of biodiversity, in addition to cultural connectedness to the land. And I feel like I learned a lot of my fundamental love and passion for environmental work having grown up in Seattle. I moved here right before high school, a couple of months before high school. So I ended up going to Westchester High School here in Los Angeles, California, where I was extremely involved, is what my mother would say, in almost everything. I had a lot of interest when I was younger, and I still have a lot of interest now, and some of them included cheerleading. So I was a very peppy, I like to say I was kind of an extrovert, introvert. You could be both, right? I really loved sharing passions, all kind of passions with people, but also just like being around a lot of people. I also, in my hindsight of trying to figure out how I was going to explain my journey, I realized that, when I was in high school, I actually was a teacher already. We had a program in my high school where we had a daycare or a preschool on site. And in my 11th and 12th grade year, I had a block class time where my 11th grade year I spent in the actual preschool, and we had to rotate through all of these educational points of early childhood education. And so I spent a semester learning how to take care of little kids and everything about early childhood education. And then my senior year, I was able to extend that and go off campus to our local elementary school, where I spent a semester teaching in special needs classrooms and 3rd and 4th grade classrooms. So that was really my first taste of teaching. And I did not know then that I would end up here now. Although I did know I loved kids and I loved educating other people. I was also really, really involved in leadership, student leadership. And that leadership led outside of my school. And I did a lot of work with the larger district of LAUSD on various issues. I was kind of a little activist, very young. And so I would join different work groups that talked about different aspects of education and what we should have in our schools. And so I know that these experiences in high school really built a strong foundation for me that it kind of led me to where I am now. So when I first graduated high school, so there were 3 things I was super interested in, even through all the stuff I did. I was interested in kids. I was interested in medicine. I really thought I wanted to be a pediatrician. And I was really interested in the environment. And so I ended up following the path of my family. I come from a family of nurses, and I went to school originally to be a doctor until I started working with doctors and realized I don't want to be a doctor. And so I did nursing instead. And I worked in nephrology. Nephrology is medicine around kidney disease. And so I worked in dialysis clinics. And when I first started, when I was my summer going into my first year of college, I got to start off by working in billing. And back then, my mom worked in a clinic, an outpatient clinic, and she used to let me come on breaks and learn the system and learn what it meant to be in this field. And I loved it, and turned out I was really good at it. And so I started off slow, and I got my first certification as a patient care technician. And that meant that I could do what you see on this screen. I was able to dialyze patients using these really special machines. So I had to learn the machines and how they worked inside and out. I had to learn all the things that you need to learn as a nurse to take care of patients. And then I continued my education while I was working. So I was actually working full-time in my career as I was learning how to do my career. And I just continued to get additional certifications and degrees until I became a nurse. Oh, going the wrong way. Then after 18 years, I decided I need a break. And so I took a year off to be with my family. And this is my family. They're much older in this picture. They were much younger when I took the time off. But I spent a year just trying to figure out what is it exactly that I want to do. And I thought maybe after that year, I would go back and I would finish, and maybe I would go ahead and become a doctor, but that was giving me a little anxiety. So I decided instead to quit and go back to school. When I decided to go back to school, my daughters were entering high school, and they had this big, beautiful performing arts high school downtown that they started at. And it was all this gorgeous space. And again, remember, I was always still really interested in environmental issues, particularly around food access and gardening and waste. And so I went to this school, and after having like 1 or 2 classes, and I was like, look, I'm going to write a sustainability program for this school, and I'm going to write it into the curriculum, and we're going to teach it in all of the grades. And I presented this in front of our school site council, and they were impressed. I honestly did not quite know what I was doing yet, but I researched, and it gave me a foot in the door. And so I was able to start what I now call my Unite for Green program, where I started a sustainability program at this school. While I was back in college for my second life career, I started this program at this school. And what it allowed me to do was come into a classroom, an AP environmental classroom, and co-teach with the teacher that was there. I was able to create curriculum for him that was based on standards that they were already working on in science, but to tie in more of the environmental, the physical aspect of the school, starting meatless campaigns and gardening, starting a garden on campus. And a lot of my work was partnered with Big Sunday and TreePeople at that time. From that work, my friend Shelly Odo, who's pictured here with me, contacted me and said, you know, you're doing really good stuff at this school. Would you be interested in starting a program where we would go into colleges and universities? And so we started a Unite for Green program where that's exactly what we did. We started college programs, competitions. Mind you, I'm still in school while I was doing this, so on-the-job learning and getting the academic learning. We started these college programs between USC and UCLA to unite the green clubs that were already on site to get more students, fraternities and sororities and their athletic departments really involved in recycling and reusing materials and becoming more sustainably minded. From that program, it kind of bled out into high schools. And so we did the same kind of programs in high schools. That extended itself out into communities, and we ended up doing some activism work in communities by connecting people who were already doing really good work and getting them involved with fundraising and helping local schools. That in turn got me into middle schools that were really interested in more environmental work, but didn't have the time within their regular school day to do it. So we provided after school programming and partnerships to support the work they wanted to do. From Unite for Green, I continued my work in schools. And this time around, where I didn't do the first time, is I did a lot of internships. I did a great deal of internships in volunteering. And these were just some of the organizations that I worked with. I got to intern with the Broad Foundation and work at their place in Santa Monica on a family program. I got to work with Sustainable Works on outreach programs with residents and businesses in Santa Monica who were looking to divert waste and those who were interested in more sustainable living. I got to train with Surfrider, Surfrider on their Rise Above Plastic campaign. I volunteered and worked in the working group with Los Angeles Food Policy Council. But the two internships that really kind of moved my journey over to where I am now was working with Garden School Foundation and Food and Water Watch. Food and Water Watch allowed me to kind of get my feelers out, my political feelers out that I was really interested in, and do some organizing around fracking and the twin water tunnels. And Garden School Foundation is really what opened my heart and my mind to actually going into a classroom and teaching. And so I ended up with certificates and dual majors in recycling and resource management, public policy, and sustainable development. And with those three, I did a lot more outreach work in communities, but was still looking for a place that I thought that I could really settle in and do all the work I wanted to do in reaching children, their families, and the communities. And so I ended up here at ECS. ECS is a organization of 3 schools, 1 high school and 2 middle schools. I teach at our youngest middle school that's 8 years old now. I'm going into my 7th year working with them. And I teach a program called Green Ambassadors. Green Ambassadors started at our high school and came down to our middle school as our environmental education program. Now, our school is environmental charter schools. However, we are social justice driven, and we use the environment as the vehicle to teach kids about real world issues, global issues, but give them the opportunity to act locally. And so I do a lot of work in the classroom with kids, but my kids come out of the classroom with me, and we do a lot of work out in the community, especially around getting connected and understanding the systems that we are educated in, living in, and growing in. And so with that work, it allowed me to build really great programs and partnerships with a lot of different people. I really do feel like some of the biggest benefits of being an educator is that it doesn't limit you to a classroom. You have the ability to go out and meet people and fundraise. You have the ability to partner with other organizations and bring their expertise into your classroom, and also give your students the ability to go out into those organizations and learn on the job, essentially, right? Get some service learning that makes sense for their lives right then and there. I also had an opportunity to work really closely with a lot of environmental outfits that always support my school and my program. It also led me to a lot of other aspects of this career that I didn't think I would be at. A lot of public speaking, writing. I do a lot of article writing and curriculum writing. And I've had the opportunity to host a few environmental educators on site at my school, but also across the country. Some of the biggest things I love about what I do is giving children experiences. This is a picture of me being able to take my 6th grade sweeties out paddleboarding to learn about plastics in the ocean. So teaching doesn't have to stay in a classroom, and it can look very different. Now, I think about where kids want to go, or young adults want to go to school for environmental programs. And there are so many more now than there were when I especially first graduated high school. But these are some of my favorites that I tend, not my only, I have a big list of favorites, but these are some California-based schools that have great environmental programs, urban development programs, horticulture programs, and education programs. And then lastly, what I would love to instill in you guys is passion. I started with what some of my passions were in high school, and those are still some of the same, actually they are all still the same passions I have today. And in hindsight, now that I can look back over the years that I've spent on this journey, that's not done. I know I am not ending where I'm supposed to be. I'm still on the road on my journey, but I know that whatever passions you hold right now are more than likely going to be passions that are going to build as you get older. And so I love this sustainable future tree because there's so many aspects within this tree that you can look at to find your passion and help lead or guide you to where you want to go. And I think I made it. That's what I got. Was that 10 minutes? I'm so surprised at myself. But thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Tashonda. I love that tree diagram too. And your story is so, it's so intriguing.
Oh, thank you.
And I felt like we were on this like ride with you, like living your life. And then you're like, it's not over yet. We're still on the journey. And it's like, yes, you are. And I just love that concept. You know, a lot of people have this idea like high school, university, job, and then it's very incremental and it's not dynamic, which that the reality is that we're all on a not never ending, of course, we're all going to die one day, but as long as, you know, we're alive, there's an opportunity to learn and grow. And I really feel like you embody that, like your spirit and your passion and conviction that you have is so contagious. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
So we will go on to Eileen, our third panelist. I think we'll have still like 10 minutes left for the Q&A. So if you have questions, keep them aside for the discussion, and we will let Eileen take the final mic.
Hi, everybody. Let's see here. All right. So my name is Eileen Garcia, and I do work with TreePeople. I'm the regional manager of Southeast Los Angeles. I was born and raised in LA, but I'm gonna talk to you a bit today about how I got to where I'm at. So my journey had many windy roads, and I love the way the last panelist speaker ended, and Emmy, it was a great segue to my journey. So basically, just a little background. I officially got my degree later in life, but before then I had many jobs. I was a photographer, I did EMT work, traveler, many, but somewhere in that always there was youth involved. I was a tutor for a long time, but so with that being said, I'll go ahead and talk about my college experience. And so I decided to go back to school. So I take night classes at East Los Angeles College, you know, with the goal of doing something in the environmental field. Had a lot of question marks hovering over me. I didn't know exactly what, but I did know. After much adventuring, I discovered camping and road trips and national parks. And I was like, wow, I want to do something that's going to keep me in nature, that's going to keep my hands to the soil, that's going to make me a part of a movement that's going to preserve the very things that I fell in love with on my journeys. So in 2013, I transferred over to Humboldt State University. And the reason why I chose Humboldt State University, because it was still in California, so I wasn't gonna get hit with a bunch of, you know, out-of-state fees. It was far away. I was able to go live in the forest pretty much. That fog you see there, that was a always occurrence. It rained sideways, upways, all the ways. I really wanted to immerse myself in something that I hadn't experienced before, because part of the journey for me is just really throwing myself out there, learning new things, experiencing new cultures. And so I went ahead and jumped into that opportunity to go to Humboldt State with, so I decided to take a degree in environmental science with the emphasis in policy. This was the literal other side of the school. So I was very fortunate. You know, we took coursework in botany, forest hydrology, you know, to really understand the natural systems, how they're connected, how they're tied to the city that we live in. So it was really wonderful to for example, when we studied in botany, the fungi, to go outside and just have mushrooms to collect and go take them back to the lab and dissect. In some of my coursework, I had to take geology, and then I fell in love with it. I traveled. I ended up minoring in geology because I loved it so very much. But my coursework was very diverse. So this is what I loved about the environmental science program is it wasn't just, nature things. It very much tied into the psychology of what makes people react. So for example, we had to study case studies of why people litter. Are they more likely to do it if somebody's watching, etc.? How children react to natural spaces or lack thereof. All these things I didn't know at the time because I still didn't know where I wanted to go in my journey. I just was absorbing all this information. So that's something I really want to emphasize is you may not always know where you're going, but keep an open mind and an open heart and take opportunities as they come, and that path will be walked as you go. So part of what I ended up doing at Humboldt State University is I became a mentor. But before I get into that, part of my coursework also was I chose to take Native American Studies. And my coursework, I loved it so much because we were on Hupa, Wia, and Yurok tribal land. That was emphasized. That was always made very clear, and there was a lot of respect. So that's the first time I really understand, whoa, we're walking on native lands. I don't think I had really understood that until I spent time at Humboldt State. And I love the Native American Studies coursework. I took all the classes I possibly could because they were actually taught by indigenous people from these tribes. So they were speaking to us directly, and I felt so honored to be a part of that. I really took it all in, and I feel very lucky, to have been able to experience that. And it was in taking those courses and surrounding myself in that culture that I really started to understand different environmental justice, not so much just as it takes place in cities, but as it's still taking place on tribal land, right? So it opened my eyes to a whole other world, really. And again, another reason why I encourage y'all to travel and experience different cultures. So another part of a job I took while I was at Humboldt State University, I had a case of basically 25 incoming freshmen that were specifically majoring in environmental science. And the point of that was to basically prepare these incoming freshmen to succeed in laboratory settings, etc. So part of what we did was we studied, so let me go back a bit. So this is the Klamath River, the center image. And to the right, we have native fishers. Salmon is basically a life source. That's their food. And because of water diversions that are taking place in cities like Los Angeles, it led to a massive fish kill. So part of what I did with the students was we went and took river samples and took them back to the lab, and we really tried to emphasize the importance of being very accurate in the sciences and in a laboratory setting. But it was great because one of the field trips we took was actually with the Wiyot tribal member who guided us in some storytelling and some meditations. And it was very beautiful because, again, it allowed for the incoming freshmen that I was working with to really dive into that culture. So knowing that I wanted to do something with environmental justice after I graduated in 2017, I went ahead and I applied at TreePeople, and I started as an eco-tourist educator. And that was such a beautiful experience because every day, again, we'd have about 25 students that each of us would take, and we'd discuss things like water, how to keep it clean, how to conserve water, recycling its needs. We'd even plant a tree with them And it was great, especially seeing inner city children that didn't necessarily have access to, natural spaces be so excited, so excited to just be up at Tree People and go on a hike and smell the eucalyptus. And that was so beautiful for me and for the children. So when a position opened up in Tree People's forestry team, I jumped on that because I kind of wanted to be back at the mountains. So here I started out doing mountain restoration, and that was great. Basically, I did that for almost a year, and then I joined the urban forestry team. So it is here now that I'm really part of, like, not just an environmental movement, but it is a social and environmental justice movement. We focus here on a lot of community engagement and educating the residents about the importance of shade trees. We also give away fruit trees, and a lot of it has to do with working with the community alongside planting trees. That's what we're doing now. So as far as the journey, it will continue going. I don't know what I'm going to be doing next exactly, but I do know that I will be working with the community and probably with youth for quite some time to come. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eileen. So now we're going to open it up for the Q&A. Feel free to unmute yourself and just ask questions. You can also put them in the chat. And let's just have a live discussion. I just thought it was so interesting that throughout the three panelists, and I think for many of us on the GE or the EE, the environmental education Tree People team, including myself, like we've all had not like a straight path. And that seems to be the overarching theme with environmental careers and professionals, is that there's no one right way to end up working for the environment. And in fact, if you think about it, any profession could have an environmental aspect. And so, yeah, it just feels really special that all of your journeys and our journeys have converged to this discussion right now. And we've all had different paths and journeys. But are there any questions from the audience? Okay, we have one question from Raquel. How do you stay motivated in your career when there is a lot of progress to be made? That's a great question. And Brian, Tashonda, Eileen, any one of you can answer these questions.
So personally, this is something that helps me as far as progress. I think it's easy to become overwhelmed when you're looking too far outside of what you're doing. So I've learned to kind of reel it back in and say, like, all right, what have I affected today? What am I doing right now? And just bringing it back. I wouldn't focus so much on like changing the world, but change the immediate energy around you, your interactions and the choices you make. And that really helps me stay motivated.
I can chime in. I would say that's a really great question for right now, because as a teacher, I'm in distance learning. As students, I'm sure you guys are also still in distance learning remotely. And it's difficult. It's very difficult, especially when I teach a class that's very hands-on and very much involved in the community and our city itself. And so the kids not having that ability is a downer for sure. But I think the thing that keeps me motivated is definitely the kids, definitely knowing that there's always change, that no matter what that change looks like, I have a say-so in it, because the decisions that I make individually, the decisions or how I teach my kids to make decisions for themselves that are rooted in environmental literacy, that are rooted in humans and people over profit, really helps me to be motivated that they'll make change in the future. And when I get to hear from my students who are alumni, who are now in college or in their own life careers, and have them come back and talk to me about what they did, or even call me mid-college and say they want to switch, their careers to a green career because now they like really, really get it, motivates me. So if it's like one kid that does that in a year, it carries me from year to year. So I would agree, like taking the one step at a time and knowing that change is inevitable and that change can be made by the decisions that you make.
Yeah, for me, I think getting to see people grow and become leaders definitely makes a difference. Because before, when I worked in landscape architecture, it's kind of like a more solitary experience. And these projects take a long time and you don't get to be the one to like make things happen. So some of the things you worked on would be like, oh, they never happened, or a council person scrapped the project. Versus at Nature for All, we have Leadership Academy and leadership development, and seeing, like, for example, Emmy went through our program and bam, a year later she's doing this stuff, and a year later she's doing other stuff. So it's much more immediate, I guess. And I think it's also knowing yourself. Like I'm a people person, and I needed to gravitate towards a job that involved more people. Like before, it didn't. So getting to see our leaders grow from the community, it like refills your cup of energy for sure.
I have to agree with you completely, Brian, because I also had a field focused experience before coming to TreePeople, and I went through like being really optimistic by seeing all the conservation work being done, then like to witnessing the reality of, through my time working in Hawaii, through my time working in Southeast Asia, and just witnessing like deforestation like right in front of me, things like animal exploitation, invasive species taking over. It seemed endless and almost like just a lack of hope. And I think because I wasn't working to develop leaders, and I wasn't working with youth, for example, as much back then, all I was seeing was the destruction in front of me. So I wasn't able to fill my cup. And I did see like some of my closest coworkers, I saw the decline in their optimism, and it impacts how much you can affect other people, So this is just my personal experience, but for me, I realized I needed to be around people and to kind of have that exchange of like positive energy. And now, like, I'm a little bit desensitized to all of the climate issues we're seeing, but I'm able to keep positive through this work of working with youth, talking and having these discussions. And that's the most important thing, because as soon as we lose hope, that's when we lose the battle, So anyways, we are having some other questions that are really great in the chat. The next one is, how did you know that this was the set path for you, from Alyssa?
I'll jump in. Okay, so how did I know it was the path? I think I didn't ever really know that this was the path. I think that the path revealed itself as I was walking on it. I think I forgot to mention earlier, but I'm a yes person, and I am very careful to not turn down experiences. I think that was really key for me, especially as a second life career, is I felt like I didn't have the ability, or I didn't have, not necessarily the time, but kind of the freedom to just not experience things, right? And so I said yes to every experience. I applied for every opportunity. I met and went and networked with people if it felt right. I really felt like my heart guided me down this road, and those experiences helped guide me. They were kind of the bumpers that led me to where I was. I think it could have led a lot of different ways. I really thought I was going to end up in the politic realm of environmental policy, doing more public work. And I do get to do that. I do get to do some of that. But experiences and opportunities opened up doors that were a lot more enjoyable to walk through. And so I think I'm still trying, I'm still figuring out, not trying, but every opportunity opens a new door or window. And I just continue to walk down that path.
Awesome. So we do have another question by Marilyn. What made you motivated to stay in your career? We kind of talked about that a little bit, but if there's something to share from one of the panelists.
Sure, I'll go. And I feel like everyone kind of has the same theme, right? Like it wasn't like I'm at A, I want to be at B for like 20 years. I think we've all moved around. And I think the flip side of this question is, what helped alert you to, I want to move out of where I am right now and go towards something slightly different? And I think it's good to, you know, be sensitive to that and respond to it, right? So like I shared, I studied graphic design as my undergrad. Like that's a lot of investment of time and money, and like I was all into it. And then at the end, after starting to work a bit in it, I was like, oh my God, I think I'm gonna be behind a computer for the rest of my life, churning out ads for things that I don't care about. And you know, you can also do graphic design for all kinds of great things, social justice organizations, community stuff, like for sure. But in the end, I'm glad I, you know, listened to that like kind of unhappy feeling and moved more towards landscape architecture. And then later, right, even responded to that feeling like the park design thing is cool, but the part I like most about my job is like the community outreach part or the activism part, trying to get parks in places where there aren't any. So I feel like that's my answer to the question is moving always closer to where you want to be. And I think the other part is a lot of people think, you know, what kind of job do you want to be, or what is the thing you want to be? For me, it's like, what kind of life do you want to have? Like, I want some flexibility. I want to feel like I'm making a difference. The people around me are really important. And so that's how I found myself at where I am.
So well said, Brian. I just got what is it? Not shivers, but goosebumps. When you said life it's about how you want to live your life. You know, I think that's true. And young people get stuck in that mindset of like, what job, what thing are you going to become? So this discussion is so great. There is another question by Vanessa. Were there times when you wanted to give up on a project, or maybe give up in general?
Well, I think for me, just all the years I spent in school, and then, you know, figuring out after I got a job in said degree path, or, you know, trying something where it was like, oh, I don't like this, you know. And again, it's just keep looking for the thing that makes you feel good, you know, and then make that your priority, right? I really like traveling, and so I really did that as much as I could. I mean, I was broke, so I made it happen, but it was through that process that I really was just like, oh, I really like nature things, you know? So just, I think following your heart, I think that's a theme that the other speakers have right now, is just figuring out and honoring the thing that makes you feel good.
I have a question for the panelists. I'm curious always about like, what would you tell your younger self? Like any tips about anything?
That's a really good question. I talk to my younger self all the time, as my younger self talked to my older self all the time. And I think that I would tell myself to slow down and enjoy the experiences, because I know in high school I felt that urge to accumulate as many grades and as many classes and be what do you call it, like make sure that you put yourself in a position to get into the college you want, to get that career that you want, to make that money that you think you want. And I wish the first time I went to school, I would have slowed down a little bit more, like the second time when I went back and I really experienced interning and volunteering and working for free, because although I didn't get cash money for a lot of the work that I did, I got so much more, so much more that is more valuable for me than the money, the experiences and the partnerships, the people I got to meet in this work who became friends or lifetime partners in work, and just the ability to know that I'm making changes in the world that definitely look at people over the profit. And I think that that's super important. So I think I would tell my young self, even going to college the first time, slow down and enjoy it. You know, the hospitals will be there. You know, the money will be there. Enjoy what you are doing because those skills that you learn in those enjoyments are what's going to last you the lifetime.
Beautifully said again, Tashonda. I feel like this group, we're all like the kinds of people who want to follow our hearts, and we don't want to necessarily follow, you know, the money. Although it's hard, obviously it's really, really hard, especially when environmental field doesn't make you a millionaire. Well, I'm sure there's some things that do, but it's just great to connect with, you know, people that believe, that have a passion. And anyways, I will say there's one more question that I'm seeing in the chat. We do have to move on to closing. So this will be the last question from Vanessa. What was your favorite project that you did and why?
I can chime in really quickly. So I've done some amazing projects. I've done really great work with kids, but I would say, and I think this will kind of jump into Cammie's question she had at the end of starting community composting. I had the opportunity at my school to actually develop our land. That was one thing. When I first came to the school, it was kind of a barren, we're a charter school, so we rent space, or we lease space. We have a long-term lease. And so we share the space with a church that's an active church, but they allowed us to develop the land. And so we were able to turn our entire campus into a living campus. Our campuses don't have gardens. We grow food everywhere. And so we partnered with the Bay Foundation about 4 years ago, and we're able to build an additional composting system on our site because we already divert all of our waste as a school. But we were able to build this system to compost local restaurants in Inglewood, their pre-consumed food waste on our site. And so we have a table to farm program. So we pick up their food waste, we compost it on our site. And now we're in phase 2 of that program, where we've built a community garden right outside our campus, right along with the same Bay Foundation, right along the perimeter of our school, where we're taking that compost and now using it to grow food for the community. And so our students, our staff, our admin and our home office and our immediate community are all involved. And it all started from us just composting our lunch waste at school. So I think to date, that's one of my favorites. It also allowed us to create a job and economic lane for someone, which I'm very much in advocacy for, creating jobs in the green world where people would think I'll never make money off of this. We can show that in a circular economy, you can create jobs. So that would be my favorite.
Awesome. On that super positive note, thank you, Tashonda. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Eileen, for sharing your stories, your experiences, your perspectives, and imparting on all of us your wisdom and your conviction. So we're gonna move on to just a couple minutes of just closing, and I'm gonna pass it on to Maria to talk about what we're gonna be covering tomorrow, as well as some opportunities for volunteers, for youth right here today on the panel. Sorry, not on the panel, on the Zoom meeting, to come out and volunteer with TreePeople.
Thank you, Emmy. Yes, we are starting to open up our volunteer events, obviously in a COVID safe way. So come join us, and we're going to start planting 4,000 native seedlings, mainly oaks, in the Santa Monica Mountains in areas that have been devastated, that were devastated by the Woolsey fire. We're going to be planting trees every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. You can also come over to our park, Coldwater Canyon Park, and help us during park work days. We also have urban plantings that are going to be starting up soon. So if you're interested in any of these events, email volunteer@treepeople.org, where somebody will connect you and try to help you with scheduling and all of that stuff. So I hope to see you all out at some of these events. We're looking forward to being able to host you once more. Next slide, please, Emmy. Thanks for stuff.
Sorry, Maria. I didn't mean
What's
to
up?
you. I was just gonna say before people start logging off, I would love, Brian just had a great idea of taking a group photo. So I just want to do that before people start logging off, if you don't mind. So you don't have to put your camera on if it's not on, but I'm gonna take a screenshot right now. Sorry, 1 second. Say cheese. Aw, thank you for putting on your cameras, everyone. That was great. Okay. All yours, Maria.
Awesome. If you could go back to that slide, thank you so much. We really enjoyed your company and really appreciate the time that you've given us. We know 2.5 hours out of your day is kind of a long time to ask for, especially after school, but we genuinely feel that everything we're sharing with you is important and is going to be super influential in what we hope you do in the future. We want to, as Kenny mentioned, partner up and be a support system for you in whatever you choose to do. Please feel free to stop by tomorrow. We're going to have a youth leaders panel. I'm going to be leading a presentation on urban heat, which is one of the biggest and leading environmental issues being faced by our communities here in LA. A community tree care workshop where we're going to show you exactly how you can take action against urban heat. And then Kenny and the Earthwise team are going to give us a quick presentation and a guide us through how to create an eco club on your school campus so that you have a team that you can put together to tackle some of these environmental and social justice issues that we know you all care so deeply about. Next slide, please. And of course, please come in costume. We will all be in costume. So stop by, show us what you're going to be for Halloween. And even better yet, we want to decrease waste and encourage you all to make your own DIY costumes. I know the Tree People team is going to be working on that tonight. So thank you so much for stopping by. We really appreciate your time. If anyone else has any closing remarks that they'd like to make, feel free to take the floor.
Just want to thank everybody for being here, and we hope to see you tomorrow.
Yeah, see you tomorrow in your costumes, and maybe we'll I don't know, find a winner. Whoever has the best costume, we can send you some reusable straws and forks. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your Wednesday evening. I know I'm gonna sleep so well tonight, having had this rich discussion and having had shared this time with you. So thank you for being here, and see you tomorrow.
Thanks,
Rest of
everyone.
your evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, panel, and everyone else.
Yes, thank you, panelists. Enjoy your evening, everybody.